Colton, what did Macron say?
Well, specifically at this conference in support of Ukraine yesterday, Macron came out and in a press conference said that they had talked about the possibility of sending Western combat troops, specifically on the ground in Ukraine, to participate in the conflict. And while he said that there had been some discussions around this, he specifically went on to say that nothing was official yet, but nothing could be excluded either. He went further, saying that he was being ambiguous on purpose and that he had never even said that France wouldn't support putting Western troops on the ground in Ukraine. When pressed a little further by media, he also added that this needed to be evoked as part of the options available to Western countries, that they couldn't rule out that at some point in the future there may be a need for justification of some deployment, some sort of deployment from troops. Now, obviously, this would be a major escalation in where things stand at the moment. You heard just minutes ago Christian Freeland talking about the work that Canada's doing. There are 300 CAF members who are taking part in Operation Unifier, but they're engaged in training in various roles. They are not on the front lines engaged in the conflict itself, in combat. And that's a very different role than what's being proposed, or what's being at least not ruled out by the French president.
So what's Canada's stance on this?
It's perhaps a little surprising that we didn't hear it more clearly from Minister Christian Freeland there as she was talking. She highlighted the way that Canada has been offering aid, the new $3 billion package that was just announced. But we heard from the Defence Minister in a statement, or at least a statement from his office, that they were quite clear. Canada is not going to be sending combat troops onto the ground in Ukraine, and that's certainly not surprising. NATO itself has come out with a very similar statement. Germany has done the same thing, even going as far, the German Chancellor going as far as to say that participants in that conference yesterday were unanimous in their opposition to the proposal that French President Emmanuel Macron had brought forth. Of course, he didn't rule it out in his press conference, but other countries are now coming out and stating their positions much more clearly. We know the UK is also against it, Poland as well. Poland, one of the softer responses compared to some of the rest, saying they're not considering helping soldiers, but they must help Ukraine defend itself. Hungary was on the opposite. They were one of the strongest responses, saying that they wouldn't even send weapons to Ukraine. They certainly wouldn't send soldiers as well. The response has been vociferous from these NATO states and these Western countries, all opposing what French President Emmanuel Macron is suggesting. But by even suggesting it, it does open the door a little bit to this possibility that down the road, this is something that could be continued to be discussed. Now, Russia is, of course, answering this as well. They heard the comments and said that we would no longer be talking about the possibility of war, but the inevitability of war spreading beyond Ukraine and to Western countries, saying that this isn't something that the citizens of Western European countries would be looking for. So an escalation of tensions here, but certainly Canada and other NATO states have been quite clear that they're opposed to this sentiment espoused by the French president.
All right, CTV's Colton Praill reporting for us from Ottawa. Thanks for this, Colton.